PsychUsim is a disease state education simulator which is accessible through PsychU.org. The educational features are designed to be easily accessed and understood. It has rigorous scientific data which underscores a wide range of topics within one platform and provides a holistic prognostic view of three psychiatric disorders: major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. It's an interactive experience showcasing a scientific and holistic view of the nuance of illness progression within various disorders. The information included in the simulator is underscored by empirically based, scientifically rigorous data. It's patient centric, one of a kind tool that allows to foster and further education of those treating individuals with mental health conditions. It incorporates a multitude of content to guide the user through potential journeys through an individual living with these psychiatric disorders, which includes 3D animations that are scientifically accurate and elegantly designed, psychiatric rating scales to help healthcare providers in measurement-based care, interactive 2D images that are engaging the user to allow a better understanding of the holistic nature of mental illness, infographics to guide the user through potential journeys for patients living with the psychiatric disorders, patient videos to see and hear the people diagnosed with these illnesses at various stages of their journeys in their own words, and interviews with expert clinicians to further guide healthcare providers in proper diagnosis, which may be difficult due to the multifacets of how illness presents itself. Ultimately, PsychUsim provides to the user something that's visually pleasing beyond just another slide deck, and the educational features are designed to be easily understood. The science covers a wide range of topics and includes information from several sources, so there's no need to click around to multiple websites or searches to find multiple forms of information. Healthcare providers ultimately will become better at understanding psychiatric illness and provide that better care to their patients. So visit PsychUsim at PsychU.org under the collection section or at www.psychu.org/PsychUsim-member.
Now that we've been introduced to what the PsychU simulator represents and the content within it, let's show you how to get there. So of course, you enter PsychU.org, and right here in collections, you can see the last option in the middle column is for PsychUsim, and that's where you enter the PsychU simulator. So here you click on the button to begin the experience. So you'll see as we dive into the brain, you're going to see several nodes pop up, and these are what we call these circles here. We have a schizophrenia node, a major depressive disorder node, and a bipolar disorder node. And these nodes represent the disease states that we can have a disease state journey through. We're going to highlight the bipolar disorder node for the purposes of this presentation. When you come in here, you'll see a help box pop up. This help box helps you navigate the journey. So in this tab, you can learn how to interact with the disease, explore the disease. We have our navigation buttons up here on the right-hand corner. We also have a search tool, which allows you to search keywords and get you to exactly where you need to be. And finally, you'll see on the top left-hand corner, this is going to orient you to the disease journeys. Within each of the disease state, you'll see that the journeys, as you know as clinicians, are very heterogeneous, and we represent that in each of the three disease state journeys. So here you can see a journey for bipolar 1. When you click on bipolar 2, you see the journey change to reflect hypomania. And within bipolar 1 and 2, of course, the long-term prognosis differs dependent on each individual. So we have a recovery journey, a relapse journey, a recurrence journey, and a switch journey. And with those journeys, as you click each, you can see the nodes or these spheres here, which represent each piece of the journey change depending on which journey you choose. So for the purposes of this, we're going to stick with bipolar 1, a recovery journey. As you heard earlier, we have different buckets of content. I'm going to take you through this bipolar disease node, and you can see the subnodes off of it: animated theories of depression, comorbidities, and disease burden. We're going to first look at some of the 3D animations that we have peppered throughout each of these journeys. If you click on the animated theories, you can see 3 tabs. We're going to show you today the altered circuitry 3D animation.
key regions in the brain have been observed to be altered, triggering disruptions to particular neural circuits in the pathophysiology of bipolar disorder. Dysfunctions manifest in the regions of the brain that modulate cognition and executive control, such as the prefrontal cortex, and emotional regulation, such as the amygdala. Responsiveness in regions involved in cognitive control are reduced, whereas responsiveness is amplified in those regions involved in emotional regulation. Particularly, the components of the prefrontal striatal thalamic circuit, which projects to the amygdala, are compromised in the disorder. This circuit is involved in organizing cognition, mood, emotion, and social behavior levels. The prefrontal cortex projects to structures such as the striatum in the basal ganglia, involved in learning, movement, cognition, and emotion. Striatal projections then extend into the thalamus, creating a feedback loop to the prefrontal cortex. In bipolar disorder, the prefrontal cortex exhibits decreased responsiveness in dorsal areas involved in cognition and working memory, while increased responsiveness within ventral regions associated with decision-making and emotion. Reduction in prefrontal cortex volume is sometimes also observed, whereas increased volume and signaling is observed in the striatum. The thalamus also demonstrates increases in volume. Meanwhile, overactivity of the amygdala has been observed during manic episodes. Together, these disruptions compromise the prefrontal striatal thalamic circuit, giving rise to the deficits in cognition, executive functioning, memory, attention, and emotional processing observed in bipolar disorder.
So that's just a flavor of some of the 3D animations we have in here. We encourage you to check out the monoamine theory, the ion dysregulation theory. They're scientifically sound and based on rigorous data, and we would like for you to check those out throughout the journey. As we move forward, you can also see that we have interactive 2D information. So if you look at comorbidities here, this is one way where we have interactive 2D information where you can see the risk of both physical and neuropsychiatric comorbidities. So if you click on hypertension, you can see the percentage of patients with bipolar disorder who also had this co-occurring condition, as well as a little blurb about the pathophysiology involved. And you can see similarly for the neuropsychiatric disorders. If you click out here and click on bipolar disease, again, we have these 2D interactive content nodes. Here you can see a brain slider looking at the nuanced changes that you see within bipolar disorder in a healthy brain in terms of the volumetric changes that can be seen. If we want to take a look at the disease variability and heterogeneity, here in this first tab, you see some of the symptom variability. In this second tab, you're going to see a brain that is, again, similar to the 3D animations. This is peppered throughout. And when you look at this, you can click on the specific brain areas and learn about its involvement in bipolar disorder. The ventral frontal cortical area, how is it involved in bipolar disorder? If you take a look at the disease burden here, this is where you start to see some of our 2D infographics. If you click on the societal burden, what you can see here are tabs for the US and the UK in terms of direct healthcare costs, direct non-healthcare costs, and indirect costs. And as you scroll down, you could see the breakdown of these costs, what they mean, and of course, within each tab, we have references. If you hover over the references, they get larger, and if you're looking for more information, all of the references are within the nodes here. As you can see, we go along the journey. I'm going to take you to the mania node, which highlights some of the nuanced differences between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2 with this infographic here. If you're looking at symptoms and alterations specifically for mania, you can see here this interactive brain once again. But here what you're looking at is where you can click on the specific symptoms of mania, and you'll see the call out here of which brain regions are involved in that symptom, as well as some more information about it here. So as you click through, you can see the call out within the brain regions and a little blurb of information. So we can click back here. Now we're going to go into the diagnosis node, and you can see there's some subnodes here. So firstly, I'd love to show you the diagnostic scales. When you click in the scales, you not only get a version of the scale that is printable and downloadable, but you'll see up here in the blue box a description of the scale and what the scores mean for each of these scales. So not only can you download it, or print it, you can also get information of what exactly is it measuring and what do these scores mean. So that's within the diagnostic scales. We also, within diagnosis, we have information about stigma. Here in the first tab, you can see some information about stigma. And in the second tab, I want to take a moment to share a patient vignette.
When I meet someone and tell them what I do and tell them about how I live with bipolar disorder, and I share my story openly, if they also have a mental health disorder, being able to tell them what it feels like to get that story out and to share it, it's really like a weight that's lifted off your shoulders. So I started This Is My Brave to give people an avenue of sharing their story and really to give them a chance to end the stigma. So standing up and sharing their story through poetry, music, and essay live on stage in a theater production has been a passion of mine for the last 2 years that has really grown and developed.
As we move back into the diagnosis node, you can see here a variety of different tabs with information about diagnosis, early diagnosis, misdiagnosis, which of course we know is very important in bipolar disorder, as well as another patient vignette with the patient talking about how they came to their diagnosis. We also want to highlight here some interviews with clinicians. We have experts in the field talking to us about these variety of different topics, whether it's diagnosing, examining symptoms, examining comorbidities. The one I'd like to highlight here is the importance of the correct diagnosis.
Yeah, if you get the diagnosis incorrect, then you're opening the door for treatment misadventures. So getting antidepressants working either too good, making the patient manic, or not good enough, leaving the patient depressed. And so that's one thing that can happen.
Some are a little more forgiving. There are certain medicines that work as well on your eighth episode as your first, but that's one aspect. Also, if you miss sub-threshold mania symptoms in someone who's depressed, when Terry was talking about misadventures, if I've categorized you as predominantly depressed, even if you're unipolar predominantly depressed, but I neglected to notice your rapid speech or your diminished need for sleep, I may unwittingly exacerbate those symptoms by using an antidepressant. Mark Fry's work with even low-grade mania symptoms in the context of depression is sort of fumes that can be ignited by an antidepressant. So if I often talk about whether there's candidacy for a particular drug, if an antidepressant was going to be used, you sure don't want to use it in somebody who's having a lot of oscillation and someone who's got even low-grade mania symptoms that could get missed, and someone who's recently been manic and someone who's historically gotten manic with an antidepressant before. It's a fairly small minority of bipolar depressed patients whom I think studies would say antidepressants may work well for. But what is the NNT, like 29 or something? I mean, it's a minority. And if you have an ailment that has a 30-fold higher chance of suicide and knocks off 14 years of life expectancy and often goes unrecognized for a decade, etc., you'd at least like to say, we've considered the possibility and the rationale for why this could be bipolar disorder, and certain medicines have been shown to work better than others. And from an evidence-based standpoint, if I had this ailment, I would like my doctor to give me something that's been shown to work before experimenting with things that haven't been shown to work.
So that's just an example of some of the clinician interview content that we have within the PsychUsim as well. We'll move along a journey to treatment. Within the treatment node, we're going to pop up this interactive brain. And now here, when you're clicking on the brain regions, prefrontal cortex, for example, you can see what the typical treatments, whether it be the mood stabilizers or the antipsychotics, and the effect that they have on specific brain regions. So again, 2D interactive content here. We have information about gaps in adherence in treatment and how that affects the long-term prognosis. what do we mean by residual symptoms and how those can affect the patient, as well as coordination of care. We have information within this subnote here of the guidelines in terms of the medication classes, how it's taken, and the recommendation for uses here in this 2D infograph. And as you move along the journey, we get more information about remission and recovery. And of course, the nodes switch depending on which journey you're in. So as you can see here, you can get information about relapse, information about switch. And this is really taking you through the bipolar disorder journey. If you click back to the main menu here, you again see our 3 disease state nodes. And you'll see similar journeys in major depressive disorder as well as schizophrenia, containing similar content buckets of those 3D animations, the interactive 2D content, 2D infographics, scales, clinician interviews, patient interviews, and so on. We encourage you to visit PsychUsim and explore these 3 disease states that we have here for you to better understand the journeys of individuals living with these mental health conditions. Thank you.